the Two Guys, One Shaker Cup podcast, hosted by Joshua Shaw and Ryan Buckeye.
Josh Shaw. I need to, I'm sitting here thinking like how I wanted to start this episode. And it's like, Josh Shaw, for those that don't know, lives in Texas. Texas is giving America a bad look right now. Thank you for that. Because just when we think that we're taking 10 steps forward, we take 20 steps backwards. Because you kids in Austin and in South Padre and all these places, ages 19 to 30 are going out to the bars, were, past tense, getting drunk and spreading this COVID crap to everybody. And now the entire world's looking at Texas and Florida and saying, shame on you, America. Do you not care? Do you not mask up, Josh? Maybe we should have worn masks for this episode.
We should have. Yeah. I mean, that would have been the extreme of social distancing.
Yeah.
And we could have really shown how much we care about the rest of the world. I'm
not shocked that something hasn't come out yet. If you Skype or Zoom call with somebody, there's a chance you can catch COVID-19. And there might be.
It's eventually going to come out there. I mean, every day something new comes out. And I understand how science is. Like, eventually you kind of disprove things and you learn over time. But that is a terrible thing in terms of public communications. You know what I mean? Like when you're just like telling everybody, oh, well, we found this out, but then it wasn't like statistically material or significant. And it's like, then it didn't make any difference because then a week later you disproved it. And it's like, you're confusing people because they have so much stuff going on in their lives. They see so many messages that all of a sudden they don't know what the hell, what to believe and what not to believe.
And we talked about this, right? Media manipulation. And the reason, like, I'm frustrated that we still have to talk about COVID, only because it's been like 16 months now, it seems like. But it's the topic of this one today was like, what did we learn during like the COVID epidemic? But it's like, it's still going on. And, if you haven't learned something about yourself, about your business, about the world during the March, April, May, June, July, 5-month spree that we're in right now, shame on you, I think. I mean, it's been a lot, and there's no sign of it slowing down. And so, this is a cool conversation to have, especially when it talks about sports nutrition, because I think a lot of businesses learned, hopefully, something about themselves, whether it be, I need to be better with my cash flow, maybe I should, do X, Y, Z. And I think today we'll discuss kind of like, what did we learn, for Josh and I, like personally, what did we learn, I think is a big thing. What did we learn about the industry is another big thing. And I think that the fitness and supplement industry in general has felt a huge impact from what has gone on for 5+ months now. And the impact's not over, and it's a worldwide impact because I think we talked about, before, like we get raw ingredients from countries like China and things of that nature where there are shortages and all these different types of things. So let's, I think it's best that we start with like what, Josh, for yourself, like what did you learn about yourself during COVID-19? Because I think that's an interesting way to start the show. Because I mean, our outside perspective inside perspective on what we learned about the industry is one thing, but like we definitely know if we learned something about ourselves personally.
Yeah, I mean, just super personal, not necessarily anything to do with my business, but like I live a pretty, I guess, like stressful, complex life the way that I set up my professional life. So because of that, in my personal life, I like it very much like a lot of repetition, very streamlined, very like that kind of stuff I've built in that if something gets rocked or kind of thrown for a loop, it creates a lot more stress than it should because it just compounds on the other stuff. So something for me would just little things like the masks or, not being able to go to a restaurant or do this or do that. Like those things might seem super small and people are just, don't sweat the small stuffs. But to me, that's compounding on already the stress that I have in my life. So then I'm like, I just would rather not do any of it. I'm like, I'd rather not go and stress myself out because I have to go do all these different things. And I know that it's not necessarily going to be long-term that all of these restrictions are going to be there. There might be some semblance of a restriction, but like, I'm not willing to like totally revert my whole life in my personal life that I've already streamlined over the last, 10, 15 years of my professional life that I'm going to do that. And that's what I've learned, like as just going out in day-to-day life, like little things, you just realize like you took it for granted. Mm-hmm. I took it for granted because I had built that up for so long that now it got all tore down in a couple of months. And it kind of created a little bit of an extra, like just pain in the butt. Yeah. That's kind of something that I kind of noticed on my side. I also like talked about this in a number of different episodes. Like I'm not necessarily the most like people person or extroverted or any of those types of things, but I do miss like in meeting, like in-person meetings, like flying to clients, doing that stuff, because I like just being able to just jam about topics. And, you know, over a 5-hour meeting, you end up coming up with just crazy amounts of things. And I know that, you know, we have Zoom and we have Skype and we have all these different things, but it's not the same because people are distracted when you're not in front of their faces. Even like we could be on our phones, we have multiple screens open, we could be doing all those things. So those types of things for me, I just small little things, but I've noticed for me, I'm like that I have learned about myself that I am excited to go back to, I guess, whenever we can.
Right. It's good. I mean, for me, I want to say, like, truthfully, and be brutally honest, like, I would love to say, like, I've learned that I'm okay with the simple side of life, but I miss all that stuff, man. I mean, I do. Like, I miss the ability to go to a movie theater and watch a movie. You know, I miss being able to go to a restaurant without a reservation, without a mask at 6:10 at night and do, you know, things like that. These are all like privileges that we have, you know, that you don't realize it. Again, Josh said it great. Like, you know, we took these things for granted for our entire lives. Like we grew up, you know, it's kind of like, I say, like, when I grew up as a kid, I had to use to open doors, right? Well, then automatic doors came, and now you take that for granted. And one thing after another, you take for granted the luxuries and things of that in life. Like, could you imagine, too, if, like, gas was gone, right? We take for granted driving, for sure. It's just, you know, selfishly, I miss those things. Could I live without them? Yeah, we've proven for 5 months we can live without them. It doesn't mean we're super happy. Thankfully, I haven't dealt with any kind of, like, and I know this is impacting a lot of people, but a lot of people are being impacted mentally. Like, it's mentally draining and causing them to, you know, have like mental health issues. And I haven't had that because I've been able to keep myself busy with 2 businesses. But I think based on, you know, that, my ability, and I don't want this to come off cocky or arrogant, but like my ability to adapt and make the best of the situation is what, and I've always had this mentality, and it pisses a lot of people off. I always say when something goes wrong, one of the first things I say to them, and I know I need to work on this, is like, don't worry, everything will be okay. Like, that's kind of just like the mentality I've always had in life, because I always, you know, sit there, it's like, why spend all this effort and time worrying about the problem when you should be thinking about the solution, you know? And it's like, okay, so you have, you know, this ailment or whatever, and I can sit there and I can be sad and I can be upset, or I can think about, like, tell myself it's going to be okay, but how is it going to be okay? And that's kind of how it was, like, you know, for me. And during COVID, obviously, businesses stopped paying my parent business, and I could have been freaking out because that's my income, you know. And my mindset was, I woke up and was like, everything's going to be okay. Did I think I was going to start a butter company? No, I didn't. But it works. And so for me, it's like my ability to adapt. I think you kind of sometimes know these things, or people will tell you these things, but you never take a second to sit back and understand it and realize, like, okay, now I know what they're talking about, because it's just you. Like, for instance, like when you look at yourself every single day in the mirror, you don't necessarily notice body weight changes, right? But like if somebody sees you on day 1 and day 80, they may be like, oh my God, you look great. So when you live in your shell for every single day, you don't notice these things. So for once, I was actually able to notice it and say, you know what? Okay, I get it now. Which, you know, is something that I'm grateful for, and I'm happy I'm able to do it. But, you know, I think, you know, in terms of like the external population and people out there, like, for instance, like your friends and family and your girlfriend, Josh, or whatever, like have they had conversations with you about maybe things that they've learned about themselves, or that they've learned, maybe not even about themselves, but about society? And I mean, like I said, we talked about media manipulation. I think if anything, like you kind of learn, like, we're sheep, and we've talked about that, because especially during COVID, and the next stat comes out, people freak out and whatever. But have you had conversations with your girlfriend about self-learning and things that have come out of this so far?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of those conversations. I think that there's a very, I think, distinct difference between like myself, and I say between a lot of other people that I talk to, is because like I make a pretty distinct line between professional and personal, where like I've always taken personal life as kind of a secondary. It's just the way that I am. I enjoy my professional life. I enjoy working. That's just how I've always been. And because of that, I think that a lot of times I can handle a lot more, be it capacity, you know, change levels, just like you were saying, adaptability, being able to like shift gears and be able to just like honestly just like grind through anything. Like if something's in front of me, I'm going to figure out how to get around it. I'm going to figure out whatever it takes. I'm going to do that thing. And I think that doesn't necessarily always like equate to my personal life, because of how I mentioned, like I like to make that super simple, and I like to just kind of be more kind of passive in that side of my life. I let, say my girlfriend's kind of, hey, whatever you want to go eat, that's fine. I don't want to make a decision. It doesn't make a difference to me, because like I've already made 1,000 decisions in that day, and I don't want to make any more decisions. But I think for most people, they tend to be more towards their personal life. And because COVID, I think, has taken a lot more of people's day-to-day personal lives out of the whack, they then are like totally wrecked, because then both their professional life that they can't really keep under control, and also their personal life that is being taken away, a lot of the liberties or just like things they took for granted are gone. Then they're just like in a real bad place, because neither one of them are really balanced in a way that works out really well. And I think that that's what you're starting to see, now with a lot of people with mental health type things, or you're seeing some of the statistics come out with like, addiction starting to kind of come up, and a lot of things that I think anybody that kind of knew what was going to happen eventually, like the trade-offs, I think that was always going to be there. But I think we talked about this on previous episodes, that I think everybody was really just thinking, what's in front of me public health wise? We need to shut everything down. We need to do all that. That's the way we're going to eradicate this all, and we're not going to have to worry about anything ever again. But they forgot that time period actually creates unintended consequences. Yeah, it maybe helps one thing, but it definitely hurts 10, 20 other things that could cause way more problems in the long run. So it's for me, I've been able to, at least on the professional side, hold that extremely well and do extremely well, and that's, I guess, again, not to your point like cocky or confidence thing, but I think that I've always been in that place of mind that I could do that. I was always kind of in the back of my mind thinking like, this next recession, I can't wait for it, because I'm going to just, I've been building myself up for this time. I didn't necessarily want it to be like this, because I think that spike hurt people way more than what it should. And I don't like to see anybody else get hurt, but it definitely has proven to me that a lot of the things that I was kind of getting myself ready for, proved to be useful. Might not have been useful when everybody else was doing, kind of just willy-nilly stuff, and because everything was going good. But I think it worked out really well for when the problems kind of showed. I think there's like an old saying or something where like you never really know who was swimming naked until the tide goes out. Like, when everything's like not going very well, like then all of a sudden you realize like who wasn't really putting in the work when things were going well, and who was. Kind of a silly way to think about it, but it's just one of those things where you don't really know. Like if everything's going well, you think everybody else is doing great, but then you realize when the things are going bad, they weren't doing all that well.
Yeah. I mean, when it pertains to the industry, that's the thing I learned, is like we are, you learn kind of who are the legitimate businesses versus the ones who struggle. And for me, it was like, on my FI business, the ones who ultimately had a hard time making invoice payments, kind of shed light on their business structure a little bit, and how they, I guess, plan and strategize and take care of themselves cash-wise as a business. But as an industry as a whole, I learned that excuse making is always like number one. It seems like, right? Like, well, this is this because of this. Now, to some extent, yes, obviously, we all know COVID impacted every business in some way, shape, or form. But to solely blame the epidemic or pandemic or whatever you want to call it on, based on your demise of a business, to me, I think is just a weird, childish way of thinking. Because like I feel like it presented, and we've talked about this, I think too. It presented opportunities, unique opportunities. We look at brands in our space who pivoted and came out with immunity products, came out with more general health products, shifted their attention and focus on things of that nature, and put some of their other performance products maybe later in Q3, Q4. I mean, that was something very simple. And if you didn't have an immunity product, they aren't hard to make. You can throw vitamin C in a bottle and call it an immunity product. I mean, really, honestly. But But there are a lot of people who kind of like, okay, they mapped out their year and they stuck to it because they don't know how to change. They don't know how to adapt. And I think, going back to me personally saying like I'm able to adapt and pivot, not everybody has that. And it showed this year, I think, so far on brands who are falling hard that they didn't have the ability or they chose not to have that ability to do those things. And it's one of those things that it's to an extent sad. Because some of these brands are really cool, but like you just didn't expect that. Like for me, when I think entrepreneur, I think of business owner, I think of myself, I think of you, I think of us like grinding for 14, 15, 16 hours a day, sometimes more, running on no sleep, doing whatever it takes to make something happen. That I don't get how an entrepreneur in today's world can just sit back and let a pandemic or an epidemic like COVID just overtake their business and say, well, it's because of this. Like, figure it out.
Yeah. It's been interesting to watch that. People just willing to give up kind of like their baby a lot of times. For whatever reason, they are quick to give it up. Maybe because maybe they knew it was never going to really work out. Maybe they're willing to let it run. Yeah. I don't know. But the willingness to kind of just to deal with an outside threat and just say, oh, this was the reason why I failed is kind of sick. It's kind of gross. Like I just have never had that mindset. Like if especially something was wrong, it's my fault first. It's nobody else's fault. Like, because regardless if it was, the rug got pulled from under you, whatever, there were mechanisms in place. The government put mechanisms in place to at least catch a little bit of that. So if you were running your business in an appropriate way, you could have kept alive enough for you as an entrepreneur to get that spirit running again and start to think strategically and get out of it. But a lot of people just bent to the knee and stopped thinking for themselves. They just stopped and they just went, well, I'm done. I guess that was it. That, it's all downhill from here. And it was depressing because people that you had maybe worked with before, or worked for, or knew, or whatever, and you see the way that they maybe were acting, you start to like, wow, how did that happen? Like, how did they change so quickly? How did that become something that just hurt them that bad? And it maybe goes back to a previous episode, the fake it till you make it. Like maybe it was just we didn't see the right person in the first place. Maybe that was actually something that was always just going to kind of happen. But there's things you mentioned around like pivots and kind of, I think I take it a step further of thinking about it in like diversifications, like where a lot of these businesses were very much like a singular product or two that was built on a singular use case, on a singular strategy, and that was it. And because something took that one away, they didn't really have anything else to fall back on, which is not the best way to think about it. You think like single product or single strategy was very fragile. It didn't work out very well. But if you were like multi-strategy, multi-product, multi-brand, like more of an ecosystem type of thing, like your business was doing extremely well, or at least being able to like ebb and flow where like one thing went way up and one thing kind of went down and you ended up being okay. But like if you ended up not necessarily having any of that diversification, you were kind of screwed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, 100%. And I think, even as we expand outside of our industry, one thing that I learned that we did a whole podcast on is that we are, as a people, a population, majority of us are just so quick to believe everything. And the fear factor is real. And it's just, and listen, people are, do I wear a mask in public all the time? The answer is no, I don't. Now I'm the asshole. Like I'm the asshole because I'm the one spreading it. And I get it. Like do it for we, not me. Okay. I have friends up in Canada who are, reaching out saying it's because you guys aren't doing all these different protocol things. Well, I have a fiance who's a nurse that we have these conversations all the time about. So everybody has a different perspective on it, which everybody should have a different perspective. But a lot of the perspectives that we have as a population are those of which we had just heard on the nightly news or that we had just read on some article on Facebook. And that as a people, a population, we're too quick to give up, I guess. And I say that because at least in our country, like there is options. And if you're listening to this from outside the country and you haven't heard this yet, you're probably going to laugh about this. But there are options for people in America to be furloughed or to lose their jobs to go on unemployment. Well, what happened is unemployment paid them what they were making at their job plus $600 extra a week, meaning they were making more money, Josh, to not work, to stay home, than it would be to work and do something productive. Now, I grew up on a farm, and if you've ever been on a farm or in that type of culture, hard work is embedded in your DNA at a very young age. And I think that in my adulthood is very apparent. Like I go, almost to the point where it's probably almost bad for me to keep going as much as I do. But I would never in a million years raise my hand and say, hey, I'll go sit at home, make more money, and lose my job. But people have done it, and they're continuing to do it. And it's just, it's unbelievable how many people just don't want to work. And call it lazy, if you will. So I learned during this just how lazy we are at. And I've always thought, that there's a reason why we're, more obese as a country. We eat like shit. We're a little bit more lazy and stuff. And I think we talked about that on one of the earliest episodes of this podcast. But it's very apparent now that we are just we're okay with mediocrity. We're okay with being lazy. We're okay with doing nothing. And that's not okay with me.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think that there were things that were put in place that were supposed to help for a very short term kind of thing. And obviously within that, you had to move as quickly as possible. Obviously, there was things that unintended consequences that ended up happening with that. One of them being that you ended up paying a lot of the lower working class people more by not doing anything. They could just sit back and kind of take that check. I have kind of mentioned a few times is that, yes, in the short term, in the next however many weeks you get it, it does provide more. But if the choice was for me to lose some more money in the short term to then make sure that I look right in the mind of my employer or my new employer because I go out and work for somebody else or whatever, and they're going to give me opportunities past this because I busted my ass and I was there. I showed up every day. I was positive. I did what I needed to do. I know 2 years from now, I'm going to end up getting way more out of that than I would by sitting back and collecting that extra $600 because the opportunity eventually comes up when you're doing the right things. When people might not always think that's true because they only think in terms of days or hours or whatever. But if you think in a longer term, you take a couple steps back and look at a longer term view, you realize those actions make a lot of sense.
Right.
And I honestly think this is an important point to bring up for the future of America, because I think that when you take this a step further, because this was kind of a good experiment, you had a lot of people, I don't know how many tens of millions of people ended up being on unemployment at a certain time, but you had a bunch of people not working. And what did they do during that time frame? A lot of them didn't do anything, which is a problem because eventually, be this 10 years from now, we're going to have to start to struggle with this question, but out of necessity because robotics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, they're going to take our jobs. And because of that, a lot of people, the same tens of millions of people, are not going to have a job to go to. We want to pay them, and how other countries are thinking about it is universal basic income. It's you pay people because you essentially need them to obviously pay their rents, pay their foods, whatever. But the point of that is they're not supposed to sit around. They're supposed to start businesses. They're supposed to start creating new ideas, innovations. That's what they're supposed to do with that money, past that point, because you don't have really any stresses of life because they're paying that for you. Similar to this time frame, you didn't have any stress really of life. I understand there was stress, but your bills were paid. So what did you do? Did you sit around and just kick your feet up and just be binge on Netflix? Or did you go out and reskill yourself? Did you go out and network with people? Did you and I know not in person, but did you go and spruce up your LinkedIn and start to meet people and write articles or do whatever? Did you do those things? I'm going to guess the majority of the people did not do that. And I think we need to bring back that point when we start to struggle that question in 2030 or whatever it is, because eventually we're going to have to figure that out again. And it's do we want to incentivize people to sit around and not do anything? Or would we rather maybe have them build roads or do some infrastructure stuff? I don't know what it is to say, hey, we're not going to pay you to sit on your butt. We're going to give you a job if you want to take it, and then we'll pay you.
Yeah, I think that would be great. That would have been great this whole time too, to have something like that nature. I mean, and who knows? Maybe we won't have to wait till 2030. Maybe we'll experience it still this year if they if there's a second wave, things shut down and we have to go back to square one again, do they do the same exact things again and keep promoting that way of life or that mentality that a lot of people have? I don't know. I've learned a lot about. I've learned a little about a lot, I should say, during this time. But I tried to focus more on what I could do for myself, my business, to keep myself healthy, going, and to build stuff for my family. So that was starting a new business. That is, saving a little bit more money here and there when I can. I bought a house because interest rates were in a tank. So like just leveraging certain things. But I don't know. I mean, I'm excited for the world to get back to normal, but I don't think the world gets back to normal in 2020. It's crazy to think like we are a month and a half away from school. It's supposed to start again for colleges. Most of the colleges are going to be doing online classes in the fall. Still no in-person stuff. Fall sports, which I know last year, Josh, we had fun with the Wisconsin-Kent State stuff, and we beat you like 77-0, whatever it was. You won't have that opportunity this year because the conferences are playing either interconference or they're going to cancel their stuff altogether, which is that's where people are seeing other platforms kind of give up because they have to, right? Like professional sports gave up because they had to, so then they feel, I don't know if that has any impact on them thinking, well, if they're doing it, then it's okay if I do it too. I don't know. And I'd love to know like what people, maybe like our people, our viewers, our listeners have learned about themselves during this time, because that's interesting. Because are you willing to look in the mirror and say, this is really what I've learned about myself? Or is it, this is what I think I learned about myself? Because again, fabrication is a huge thing in life. We like to fabricate things and say things that, people want to hear. I think for me, another thing that I learned is like, I learned that it's okay to step back for a little bit and just to kind of like disconnect. For instance, I went to a lake this last week and I went fishing. I haven't fished since I was like a kid. And it's like, it's okay not to be connected to your cell phone all the time. And the reason why is because the world's not as active as it once was. And it's, in the past, I would hate to do that. Like, I wouldn't want to be disconnected from my phone or disconnected from technology because I always thought I needed to be connected or be there in case somebody needs something. But, and this maybe sounds like counterintuitive to what I was talking about earlier about being hardworking, but it's okay still to take some time for yourself that I was never okay with prior to this.
Are you selling an ebook on that? Because I could use some tips.
Well, first you have to go buy yourself a rod and reel and go out in Texas and see if you can catch one of those lake basses. I should create an ebook, an audio one, because I have a face for radio. But that's very difficult. I mean, but given the parameters and the environment that we're in, it ended up being okay because you didn't have to be there all the time, and it ended up being like a good thing for me, like mentally. I mean, you go so often, like sometimes you start to ignore certain things in your life, and that are important things. And being able, when the world slowed down, I was able to slow down a little bit with it, which I'm grateful for. Do I miss all the things I talked about earlier on? Yes, I do. But I'm also grateful and thankful for slowing down and being able to appreciate certain things, like time with my daughter, for instance. Like, in the past, I would be on my phone when I was with my daughter because it was business. Now it's like I'm with her, and I should have done that then. But this whole situation forced me to do that, and it was a good thing. Like, it's a positive thing. I don't look at this pandemic and think of all the negative things that happened in my life. I think of what are the positive things that happened. I'm able to enjoy time with people in my life. I was able to start a business, which obviously makes you busy again, but like kind of get back to being happy. And that's what it did for me, which I think is, I don't want that to make me feel like or seem like I'm soft, but like finding happiness during a pandemic is kind of opposite for what a lot of people probably experienced.
I think that's the key to, a growth mindset is, do you see the positives in things or do you see the negatives? Like, I mean, we've talked about it before. It's that idea that, a challenge is a challenge, but also being able to overcome that and being able to see that there's opportunities past that initial punch in the face. It's like, if you're able to constantly have that mindset, you're going to do great in life, but it's tough to do that. It's not, I mean, it's easy for everybody to be like, oh, this is, throw you some good rah quotes or whatever, but it's tough to do that. And at least I think over these last couple of months, people have had some reps to fail a few times at trying to do that and maybe being successful and maybe retraining themselves how to think. hopefully, because I think that this is not going to be the last time something like this happens, and it's not going to be the worst of our lives. So I think it's one of those learned things that you're going to have to take and amplify the next time. And if you weren't able to learn anything, you're going to be in way worse trouble the next time.
Yeah, it's interesting. Leave us a comment on our social channels. Like, I just want to know more or less what you learned about yourself. I think that's where my interest is. I mean, or your business. If you're within this field, the supplement field, or in the dietary nutrition space, like to hear especially if you're a controller of some sort or leadership. What did you learn about your brand? What did you learn about other brands? Being respectful, of course. I think that some people in this space like to be disrespectful, but you can leave that on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. Leave it via our YouTube channel as well. You can follow Josh on social. He's at J Shaw Consulting. You can follow us on social. It's 2 Guys, 1 Shaker Cup on all the major platforms. Josh, I haven't done this in a while, so I'm going to do this right now. A little parting wisdom from Joshua Shaw.
I would say, there's more noise in this world than ever, and there's constantly people trying to distract you from what is best for you to do. So figure out what you could do each day to improve your life, and focus on that over focusing on what other people are trying to get you to focus on. Just stick to what's going to be best for you and who's around you, and you'll be much better off than paying attention to what everybody else is talking about.
Cancel the Noise, the ebook, coming soon from Josh Shaw.